Lions running back Jahmyr Gibbs could return to practice next week, according to head coach Dan Campbell. Campbell earlier today told reporters, quote, "Our plan is to get him going next week. He's trending the right way." Gibbs dealing with a hamstring issue. Lots of fantasy managers were bullish on Gibbs and Bijan Robinson as rookies last year. And not much has changed in 2024. If anything, their stock is rising as their ADPs are falling. Gibbs right now a top 5 running back at fantasy football today. But there are others with more draft strategy variants, and thankfully we lean on the guys from FFT to navigate those waters. It's must draft and void with Heath Cummings and Jamey Eisenberg. Guys, take it away.
Thanks, Tommy. Is Gibbs a must draft or a must avoid for you?
It depends on the ADP. All of these things do. But right now, I would say he's closer to an avoid.
I feel that way too, but he's starting to creep back into a must draft just because he's getting healthy. So hopefully we'll see him back on the field and doing what Jahmyr Gibbs does. Let's take a look at some must draft players for me. Here's a few guys that I like to get on a lot of my fantasy teams. Tommy alluded to this earlier, a lot of wide receivers. So Drake London, Jaylen Waddle, T. Higgins, Kyler Murray. We talked about this on Fantasy Football Express today when we did My Guys episode, and Kyler Murray, the captain of My Guys fantasy squad. Just great value, one of the best quarterbacks this year. He's my number 6 quarterback. Let's talk about Waddle and Higgins, Heath, because these are two guys that I think fit a similar profile. You could throw Devontae Smith in there as well. They're number 2 receivers on their respective fantasy teams, but there's still a very easy path for them to be top 20, top 15. In the case of Jaylen Waddle, I know we both have him right around 12th wide receiver. They both could be top 12 even without an injury. But if there's an injury to Tyreek Hill, we saw it last year in the Jets game, he could be an absolute stud.
Yeah, absolutely. And for me, I think that you could see Jaylen Waddle, if Tyreek Hill goes down, as like not just an absolute stud, jumps into the top 12 wide receivers. He might be the best wide receiver in fantasy football. With Mike McDaniel's system, with the fact they're going to throw the ball 600 times, we've seen a very small sample of Waddle without Hill, but a full 8-game sample might make him the number 1 wide receiver in fantasy.
And the same with T. Higgins. You're talking about a Jamar Chase holdout right now. T. Higgins could be a superstar. So very good on his own. Both these guys, again, very similar profile. So if something happens, you can see both these guys really skyrocket in terms of ADP. A couple guys for you, when we take a look at your list, Heath, that you got wide receiver in Rashee Rice and Javonte Williams. Let's show the 5 guys that you're highlighting here of the guys you want to draft. Rice is fascinating, but you got Trey McBride, who was probably the captain of your My Guys list, Cortland Sutton, T. Higgins as well, and Javonte Williams. Tell us why Rashee Rice is moving up the board.
Well, I think you talked about you do ADP review, and Rashee Rice is probably going to be the top guy in terms of the risers the next 2 weeks. Every day that we get closer to the start of the season, there's no league or legal consequences for what happened in the offseason. It makes it more likely he's not going to be suspended. And if he's not suspended, he might just be a top 12 wide receiver. Had a 25% target share with Patrick Mahomes in his last 6 games last season. And Javonte Williams, another guy who's rising because he had so many bad offseason reports about how he might get cut. And now he's the clear number 1 wide receiver. Running back in a Sean Payton offense that had 506 running back opportunities last year.
Just in terms of both these guys, because I think it's easy to take 2 players on their respective teams at their respective positions. Do you look for Rice and maybe an Xavier Worthy later, or Marquise Brown if he falls, to get some insurance just in case there is a Rice suspension? And then for the Broncos, are you targeting Jaleel McLaughlin as well, maybe as a handcuff? Or if you miss on Javonte, knowing there are so many touches there, do you target just the other Broncos running back?
It's getting harder to draft Rice and Worthy because Worthy is another guy that's rising up draft boards. I think, though, you see Marquise Brown going the other way now outside of the top 100. He's a good guy to pair with Rashee Rice. And absolutely, Jaleel McLaughlin remains a huge, huge value and the clear number 2 running back in that offense.
Let's take a look at the guys that you're looking to avoid. I know some of this is based on ADP. Some of this is just guys that you're not drafting because you don't want to buy into their season potential or lack thereof. Josh Allen, Jordan Love. I'm going to assume Allen is based on ADP. We'll talk about that in a second. Saquon Barkley, Derrick Henry, and Devontae Adams. So for you, Heath, Derrick Henry, the king, he's 30, new team, new situation, but you do not want to draft him this year.
I don't, and I think as a rule, if you look at all these veteran running backs that change teams, I don't want to draft most of them at their cost, but I particularly don't want to draft the 30-year-old that's going to a team that has Lamar Jackson who's going to handle 30% of the rush attempts. You generally see, as I said, veteran running backs get worse. Henry here is being drafted higher amongst running backs this year than where he finished last year. I don't want to make that bet.
And then Josh Allen is, for some people, myself included, the number 1 quarterback. But even I wouldn't draft him where he's going. So when you look at Allen's average draft position, we were just talking about this, he's the 18th overall player right now, going in the middle of round 2, and I think it's going to keep climbing. So all the quarterbacks, really, for me, the top 3 guys, while they are ranked in the top 3, Jalen Hurts, Patrick Mahomes, They're in the round 2 range. I'm out on almost all 3 of them that cost. But why is Josh Allen someone to avoid for you?
I actually have Josh Allen 4th, behind Mahomes, behind Hurts, behind Lamar Jackson. It's because of his receiving core, losing Stephon Diggs, losing Gabe Davis. I don't know who his number 1 wide receiver is, and we saw that impact Patrick Mahomes just last season. I think it's going to impact Allen. Lamar Jackson, you're right, is the only one of those top 4 that's a good value on draft day.
All right, so we'll see how these quarterbacks perform. But again, you don't have to reach for him. The quarterback position is very deep. The guys that I'm looking to avoid, very similar to what Heath was saying about Derrick Henry, I don't like older players when they start to show you something that could be a little bit of a decline. Raheem Mostert and Mike Evans haven't really got there yet, and James Conner is actually coming off his first 1,000-yard season. But all 3 running backs, 29 years or older, Mostert's 32, and Devontae Adams and Mike Evans, both wide receivers that are age 31. Devontae Adams' name still carries a lot of weight. I understand that. But we saw last year, from 2022 to 2023, lost 4 points per game off of his average. And now you're asking Gardner Minshew, who can only get 4 touchdowns out of Michael Pittman last year, to continue to support this player at a very high level. If you told me Devontae Adams getting 69 PPR points, I'm fine with that. But I'm not taking that at the back end of round 2 or the early part of round 3. It's more of a middle to the end of round 3 range, and we just don't see him going right there for the most part in a lot of our drafts. And then for Mike Evans, he's a little tougher to have a negative slant on because he was great last year once again. But Chris Godwin going back in the slot. I think Jalen McMillan's going to be a factor. Cade Otton's going to be a factor. And you have the Dave Canales situation that went on when he left Seattle. The passing game suffered a little bit. We'll see if the same thing happens in Tampa Bay. But I'm not buying these 2 older wide receivers. They are not going to be on a lot of my fantasy teams. Even if the price is right, I'm just going to avoid these guys. So these are players that we're looking to avoid. Obviously, players looking to draft as well. Make sure you check out our Fantasy Football Today podcast as well. Tommy, Jacqueline, back to you guys.